You're listening to Bellwethers podcast with Matthews Joseph.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning into Bellwethers podcast. Today we have, for the first time, we have two people joining us on this episode. So for the first time in 2022, actually, so yeah, I forgot to add that. So we have Abeyson Job all the way joining us from Hyderabad, and we have Reuben Philip, who's local here, right in Dallas. Reuben is the creative pastor at Metro Church, and Abeyson is one of the collaborators for Bridge Music. He's been on their latest songs, and he's also ministering at Hyderabad right now at Brazen Grace Church. Also, these guys are the brains behind the Beautiful Waste podcast. They're the hosts, and if you guys haven't listened to them, please do that. It's an amazing podcast. You do want to keep that on your subscription list. So I'm not gonna keep on talking anymore, but I'm gonna let these guys do the talking today. Thank you so much, Abeyson and Reuben, for joining us. It's an amazing honor to have you guys.
Thank you so much for asking us to be on the podcast. I feel like we're joining a great lineup that you already had. Some of my good friends, Steve James, Steve John, who's one of my cousins also, and Sam, and so many other people that were on there. So I listen to the podcast every now and then, and I'm glad that I get to be a part of it now.
Yeah, thanks, bro. I'm so excited to have you. You're just a true friend, just a normal in just Dallas. So now to connect with you through this podcast is really exciting. It's like having all my friends and just having a conversation together. So really excited to be here. Thanks, Matthews.
Definitely. Yeah, it's such an honor to have you guys. So before we start off, I want to ask this one question, which I definitely told you guys beforehand. Well, Beautiful Waste. How did you guys come up with the name Beautiful Waste? And honestly, like, waste is something that it's like trash. That's like something you don't even want to look at, and you call that Beautiful Waste. How is the logic behind that work? And I think that's amazing. But I definitely want. I'm pretty sure all the people who are listening to us wants to hear. So, Abeyson, you want to go for that?
Yeah. So the word Beautiful Waste, or it's just such a contradiction, right? Like both of them together. It originates from the story of Mary of Bethany, and around 2018 was when God was putting this whole. Actually, 2018 May, I was at an upper room conference, and that was the time that God put India on my heart, when I was completely happy with where I was in Dallas and all the things that I was doing there. And, I had like my whole 5-year plan figured out, and, like all the different things that a person in their, late 20s are supposed to be doing. I think I was doing that. I was kind of happy with where I was, but when God put India on my heart, I was genuinely debating with the Lord, and also like in a way reluctantly, like, God, I don't want to go. Like, you really need to do something in my heart for me to even accept this. So God was teaching me from the life of Mary of Bethany during that season. And, that's one of those stories that is mentioned in all 4 gospels. So, not every story is mentioned in all 4 gospels. So just the fact that it's mentioned in all 4 gospels just shows the importance. And even to the end of the story, Jesus says, wherever the gospel is preached, what she has done will be remembered in memory of her. And what she has done is something that was considered to be a waste by every person in that room. And maybe even herself. Like, I don't know if she thought of it that way, but I know that every other person in that room other than Jesus saw it as a waste. But then Jesus see it as something beautiful that is she's doing unto him. So that's where this whole concept comes, because even for me to do this thing of going to India felt like a waste. And I know there are so many other people who are like, why are you wasting your peak of your life, that late 20s, where you're basically like setting up to so many different things in life and all that. So yes, in a very normal perspective, everything looked like a waste, just like how when Mary broke open her year's worth of salary at the feet of Jesus, it looked like a waste, But then Jesus says, no, what she's doing unto me is a beautiful act of worship. And that's just kind of how this whole thought came together, like a beautiful waste. Like it is, in a way, technically it is a waste, but it is a beautiful waste. So yeah, that's just how the word came about. And I love that I also have Reuben on the podcast, because that was like a season where Reuben, I mean, yeah, even maybe because of distance, we don't talk as much right now, but that was like a lot of my thoughts whenever God would like bring things or teach me things. Reuben was one of those guys that, I could like talk to him like, hey bro, this is what God's been teaching me. And he would do the same with me, and we would just talk about stuff. And I felt like it's just, sometimes you can think of all these things, but when you're sharing it with somebody, it starts to make more sense. I don't know if that works with you guys, but yeah, just talking to him and just coming up together, with this thing with beautiful waste. And if you see the logo, Ruben actually helped me design it because he's a skillful designer. Uh, yeah, so that's the origin story of beautiful waste.
I think that's amazing because, like, even that's inspired from Mary of Bethany. And, we have a lot of stuff like spikenard or bass and mopcom. All of these things are based out of Mary of Bethany, which is actually, where, like, one of the things that you mentioned, like when Jesus tells her that, this will be remembered wherever the gospel is being preached. That kind of the kind of sacrifice she makes over there with 1 year worth of money, 1 year worth of hard work, 1 year worth of wages. She's just like breaking it, washing the feet of Jesus. And that's like something amazing. And and that story has inspired, just like, when I see your beautiful waste, or when we see spikenard or mopcom or bass or all these things, it's actually the fulfillment of what Jesus said to Mary. Jesus was saying that this will be remembered, and that's the same thing that's happening even 2022 years later. Still in this time, we are remembering what was done, that, like, 2 millenniums back, and which is still being fulfill what intended to do. And I think that's amazing, because most of us don't understand the type of sacrifice that Mary gave at the feet of Jesus. And we all see that, we all just like read through it just like a normal scripture, or it has so much of intense meaning to it, and we just like miss it out. So I think that's amazing what you guys have been doing, with the name Beautiful Waste. That's still like, it's just like, it just makes you think for a second, right? Beautiful Waste. Okay, that sounds something different. But I think that's amazing. And I know you guys grew up, but you guys grew up together here at Dallas, and you guys been friends for a long time. So why you started the podcast, like, one of the things that you did mention over in your description and in your whole thing was collaboration and competition. So what do you guys feel about that? How do you feel like you guys have helped collaborate within the city of Dallas, or within are the local or the locations that you are at? How do you think that this podcast have helped you collaborate with different people? And I'm gonna go for Reuben for that.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. I honestly, I mean, it's a lot of conversations we have, right? Like off the podcast, right? Matthews and Ebison too. We talked. We don't need a podcast platform to talk about what God has been putting in our hearts. This is just the platform that God has given us to, like, take it to the next level, or like be able to reach a greater audience. But I think ultimately, like, it comes down to like understanding each other's heart, right? And I think understanding, like, we always say this in our podcast when we always talk, like, this is a conversation me and Abby would have when we're driving, or we're like calling each other on a FaceTime call, because this extends more than just like those words you're saying, competition, collaboration. Like, yeah, those are words that understanding those words is one thing, but understanding that we don't have to worry about those things when you have a relationship with somebody, right? Like, I'm not in competition with Abby. I want to collaborate with him, but that's just because he's my friend, So I'm not like thinking about this. It's not like methodical in my head to be like, oh man, how do I collaborate with Abby? Oh, no, we love just being there for each other. We love talking to each other. And so just to understand the whole back end of the podcast, just to go back, I'm sorry about that. me and Ebby have been friends for like so long. The first time that I'm gonna retrack and talk about our history together, but we made like rap music together. He would come over to we made like a CD and had him rapping, I was rapping. So it started there. Then from that point, and no, we will not rap again. That part of our
I was about to ask
story.
you that. So
No, that's done now. And then we started leading worship together, and after leading worship together, we couldn't connect like as far as like we couldn't physically be with each other. But then we're like, hey, how can we take our creativity to the next level and do something that God has been birthing in our hearts? And so that's where the podcast actually started. But all this actually started from a genuine relationship that we had for each other, and the care that we had to spend time. And I love platforms like this, but ultimately I love like the one-on-one conversations that we have. And Matthews, we've had so many conversations. I love driving in the car with this guy because we have like those one-on-one conversations off script, not being recorded and stuff. But those are genuinely like the moments that I love the most. And that's where collaboration and no competition comes in, because it just comes from like a genuine place, and a love for each other. Yeah.
I think that's amazing what you just said, because I want to add on, like, being intentional also adds on to that. I know we've had this conversation multiple times. I've had this with Reuben too, like, being intentional about stuff where we just like, we like, yeah, I think it's just, I think, we just have to be intentional. Like, we just have to not expecting something in return while we talk to a person or offer something or offer help. I think that's also an important part of collaboration, and I think I've seen that all with Reuben multiple times, and in working with him too. So I think that's gonna be one of the most important things that we can reflect upon. And I think that was amazing, bro, what you just said. I think being collaborating is one of the best things that we can do right now in this century, in the 21st century. And I think like a lot of people are looking up to people like us, or people like or when we collaborate, where we put aside our differences, which community we're from, what church we're representing, what organization we are from. We take all of that out of the equation, and we just go there and say, hey, let's do something, let's collaborate on this. I think that makes a whole lot of difference, in this community that we are in. And I want to jump on to our next question here. I think, I mean, I don't know if you guys are planning to release any episodes in the future, but at the time we are recording this, the last one that you guys did was reflecting on your legacy. And I feel like that's a very important thing that I want to ask you guys. What do you guys feel about legacy? And I think I'll just like, what do you guys feel about your legacy as at Beautiful Podcast? And how do you think that we should do that? Like, how do you think people should build a legacy? I'm going to start with Abeyson, and then, we'll jump to Reuben on that.
I think to answer your doubt of if we're going to release more podcasts, we definitely want to.
That was not a doubt. I'm pretty sure you guys will, but but I'm just saying, by the time this will be released, I don't know if there's a new one coming up.
I'm just clarifying for everybody who's listening. We just kind of took a break because I wanted to focus on the like marketing the clothing stuff, and after that I just started working. And I've been actually recently just thinking of talking to Rube. Rube, you want to get back on it? I'm just talking to him right now as we're recording this podcast.
Yes. Yes. We need to figure out scheduling.
I know.
Yeah,
we need to. It's just that, I live in India. Reuben lives in Dallas. I work in the mornings, and by the time I come home, it's time for Reuben to start working. And we just need to figure out. Yeah. But yes, we would love to do more podcasts, and I feel like we should just invite more guests. So maybe Matthews can be one of our guests in the days to come, and we'll just have to say we'll just do the same thing all over again on a different platform. That's all we're gonna do. So
and we'll ask him a lot of questions. We'll put him on the hot seat.
Reuben, I have an easy on you. Okay, come on.
Oh no, man! People want the extended podcast. They want to hear the whole thing.
We'll take a
Yeah,
poll on
Right.
that.
that's awesome.
Uh, all right. Sorry for my rabbit trail because I kind of forgot the question now. What was the question again?
About legacy, like, how do you think, like, reflecting
Legacy.
on your
Yes,
legacy?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So when I think of legacy, the first thing that comes to mind is stories, right? Because how do you remember somebody's legacy is when you just reflect on their stories and the things that they've been through and all that. So even just as a podcast, I feel like these are stories that we're putting up online, and they're going to remain for I don't know how many ever years that internet's going to exist. And these are stories. Like many people back in those days, they knew stories because they were passed down from generation to generation. Now we have this blessing of a technology where we can share stories. And even on that podcast about legacy, I felt like we were just sitting and just talking about all the different people that impacted our lives for us to be
Hmm.
where we are, and all those conversations that we had with people that we looked up to, and the people who have shaped our thinking and all that stuff. So that's what we were reflecting on that podcast. But I feel like even the conversation that we're having right now, we never know. Maybe it could be somebody else who's listening to this right now, and maybe they're getting something from this conversation. Maybe this is shaping their perspective on different things, and this is going to be there to stay to whoever. Maybe like 10 years later, somebody comes across this podcast and is like, oh wow, this is crazy. And I think that is legacy, just sharing stories of what's been going on, what God is doing in and through your life. That is legacy. So I'm glad that we get to be a part of it. uh, Even in the little things. Many times legacy sounds like a big thing, but God just takes our simple yes to just press record and talk about life into, he turns it around into legacy, even without us knowing it. So yeah, that's just kind of what I had in mind when you said legacy. So Rube, take it over.
Yeah.
I feel
I
like
mean,
Ruben
all
is
the things
gonna
that.
preach right now, so yeah, I'm on.
Oh no, I please cut me off if I'm taking too long.
You're
So,
good. You're good. Go for it.
um, yeah, all the things that Abby has agreed with, man. Like I think like God has given us this gift. God has given us certain like things that dreams and desires in our heart, and not for a moment do I want to take for granted what the things that God has for us, especially like what we have at the age that we get to do the things that we get to do. It's such a blessing, you know. So I'll make it more practical in the sense of talking about the podcast. So we talked about the woman as she broke the alabaster jar. The significance of that thing that really stands out to me, as Abby was talking about the beautiful ways part of it, uh, is not just the alabaster jar, is the oil that permeated the whole room, you know. And sometimes when I think about legacy, I just think about like what is it might not even just it won't be something even like physical, but it's just something that like you left something for people to now like take and they could do something with it, you know. And so that simple act of her breaking that jar, the perfume permeating the room, is such a symbolic act of us leaving a legacy for the next generation, you know, of leaving something for them to they recognize, oh, I don't know exactly what that is, but I know that there was somebody that went before me and did that for me, you know. There was somebody that worked hard, you know. And oftentimes we might not even see the blessings now, you know. We might not even reap the harvest now, you know. But I wonder if sometimes that fellowship that we have with the Lord is in the times that we are uh like while we're working hard, you know, if God's there with us. And so like for me it's a blessing to be able to work hard, because I know that there's kids that will see this blessing, there's my kids that will see the blessing. um and as long as I could do what I get to do, for me that's a legacy that I want to leave here on this earth. So this platform that we have is a good start for us, and all the things like Ebby's doing with the clothing brand, and to see a logo on someone's shirt, right? Like I'm like, maybe they don't know who the logo designer is, you know, like that's fine, but whenever they see the logo they'll be like, I wonder what that means, you know. And it's a conversation starter, you know. Or it's like little things like that that matter the most to me, that maybe not mean a lot to the world, but like when I see like people like when they have conversations on things like I got to be a part of that, man. That's so cool, and so yeah,
No, I
that's
feel
what it
like
means to me,
what you
bro.
guys saying is like, in a bigger context, like, it's what we leave back to, right? What we leave, like Ebison was saying, like 10 years from now, if there's someone listens to this episode or some episode of Beautiful Ways, I think that's like, what you're leaving back. And I feel like today in our generation, people don't want to leave back anything, or
Mm.
even like people are not even caring about what to leave back. They don't even, that's not even their concern. They just want to do life, they want to do something today and just like move on for the next day, and where they don't even think about what the big picture is, what God has called them to be, or what they can do with their potential, with their influence. They don't see that, and they just like waste their influence, waste their legacy over something, which is something that we need to change. And I think like you guys are doing an amazing stuff with that. So yeah, and I'm gonna jump on to the next question, which is about community. And how do you think, like, this the episode, like, the courage that you guys had, like, especially coming out from an Indian community where not a lot of people do podcasts, honestly. It's a very minimal number of people do that, and that too, something like this differently. How do you think how did you guys have the courage to do something like that from the Indian community? And also, how do you guys feel about it now that this podcast is influencing the community around you as well? Yeah, I think I'll switch with Reuben for this one first, and then come to Edison.
Yeah, I think we never had the intention, honestly, bro, it's surreal to us to think that there's people who listen to the podcast, because like I know we get messages sometimes and people like on our Instagram DMs be like, bro, thank you so much. And I mean, I'm thankful. Like I'm really grateful that people are listening to us. But man, like honestly, like one, it's a desire that God put in our hearts. I think me and Abby ever being disobedient to what God has done to us, man, like we cannot live another day if we did that. And for some reason, God always puts the same desires in our hearts at the same time. Like even when going back to like even when we want to like do worship together, like we have similar pathways of getting to where God wants to take us. And to me, that's what community is, like we always talk about this and we kind of laugh, like, if you feel like you had to kind of force it a little bit, like there's like a discomfort to community, then maybe like, maybe you're trying too hard, to force a community that needs to come, and maybe it has to be stripped down a little bit, and just like get to know each other. I think in this world, like people don't want to actually genuinely get to know each other. There's always like a motive to community now. We talked a little bit about that in another podcast, right? I think we did. We talked about it in another episode we had. But I think like everyone wants to have like a methodology to community, like churches too. I'll be candid about it. Like, how do we force community? How we get this? Like, it's good. Like, it's good to have like a foundation. But I think like a lot of times it just comes from a genuine place of like loving each other and being intentional. Like we talked about that earlier, being there for each other. And I think for both of us, that's just where it came from. And like from the podcast itself, like the community that came from that, I hope that they are also being intentional about each other, because one day we don't want it to be about the podcast. And that's me just talking. Like, I don't want it to just be a podcast, but I want to be a conversation that starts from that podcast. And so hopefully that's where community can come and people can find each other through that process. Yeah. What do you think, bro? Abby? He's about to spit some truth right now.
Nah, I mean, it's just the same thing what you said, right? Like we never intended on, oh, let's make a podcast. It's like I called Rube. I'm like, hey, you remember how we used to just sit in the car and talk about different things? You want to do that and press record and just put it out there for, I don't know, maybe it's good. And just like how Ruben said, when people message us and say like, oh, we loved your conversation, I'm like, oh, you actually listened to us. That's great. Like it's not like a expected, oh man, we're gonna do this and this is gonna happen or anything like that. So at the root of it all is just the relationship that we had, and uh, we were blessed with our conversations. And I'm like, hey, uh, what if we just put it out there and see if anybody else wants to join the conversation, because that's how community is built. Like, you don't, just like Ruben said, you don't like force it. It's just basically like, hey, you like that show, I like that show too. Oh, you like that show, let's come. It's just come and talk about it. And
Yeah.
sometimes, because we love that show so much, a third person who might never see that show is like, oh, what are these guys talking about? I want to give this show a try. And then they'll come and try it, and then, oh, they might like it or they might not like it. But it's just how community works. So yeah, so that's pretty much all
I
I
mean,
have to say. Is just, yeah, go ahead.
there'll be times where we disagree all the time. You know, I don't think like just being community doesn't mean you have to be like minded. Like, like it's okay to like have some friction. That's like where we find like different perspectives. And sometimes whenever like Abby talks in a different, he sees it from a different angle. It's like I have to understand that's a different perspective. And a lot of times, like we learn so much from each other by also being like, okay, that person might be a little different, but that's okay. It's okay that that person thinks a little bit differently than me. That's the way God it made them. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think everyone thinks like we have to be like minded. We have to love the same things. We have to watch the same TV shows, and all this.
The,
I mean, as long as God is at the core of it all, I think we'll find that commonality in at least Jesus. The gospel.
the the
Yeah.
differences make a good content.
Yes, that's right. No, I disagree with you, bro.
No, I feel like that's
you,
very
you,
true because sorry, it wasn't gonna go on.
no, I was just gonna say a bunch of people are gonna just hate me when I say I hate The Office, but hey, it's okay. Ruben likes it.
Okay, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but yeah, okay, I hate you for that. Office, that's like one of the best TV shows. Okay,
Friends
Bro.
over Office. Friends over Office any day.
Woo.
okay.
Are you
Oh,
gonna kick
okay.
me? Are you
I
gonna
think
kick me out from the podcast now? Are
I
you
think
gonna
that's
kick me out
I
from
think
the
it's
podcast?
time. I think all right, bye. Get out. I'm kidding, but I do want to say like that those disagreements do have a lot of potential over there because that's where something like we get to learn a lot of stuff from those disagreements. Like I've disagreed with a lot of friends on different stuff, but it has also helped me like it only happens when we believe that what we are saying is the only truth. Like when we are so fixed and adamant that okay, what I believe, what I see is the only thing that matters to me. And if we change from that perspective to see, okay, wait, maybe this guy's perspective or maybe this guy's thinking has something else to do with this. And when we add that, and I think that makes a big difference. And I think that's how we can be more broad-minded rather than being the narrow-minded individuals that like the society has actually is asking us to be. And when that happens, I think like that's a big broad perspective for change. And it's like agree to disagree, where we actually are like, hey, even if you don't believe in me or you don't believe in my ideas or things that are my beliefs, I don't care. But but we can still be friends. I think that kind of mentality has to happen over us because that's what eventually helps us build a community on a secular way, or where we don't define it by religion or by thoughts or ideas or politics, where all that comes secondary, where it's primary to build friendships, to be intentional. I think that's how collaboration is going to come on. And I really love that you guys disagree on that, but the office thing, that's definitely a different conversation. So I think we might do a podcast on office versus friends,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a bigger debate.
But Jesus trumps office and friends. So that's why we gather together on this podcast and continue to listen and talk. So,
amen. I agree with that. All right.
altar
so
call. Anybody wants to get saved right now? I'm just joking. Go ahead.
No, so Abeyson, I'm not gonna kick you off right now, but I think we're almost at the end of our time right now. But yeah, but before we wrap up, what do you guys feel like? From Beautiful Waste, how do you like? If somebody wants to start a podcast or somebody's like, at the verge of like starting theirs, and that person, he or she is thinking, okay, should we do this? Should we not do this? How do you think society will look at us? How all those, where they're having that conflicts in their minds. What do you want to tell them? And what do you feel like, or what do you feel like to say a word of encouragement over to those young or old individuals who are ready to pursue their passion with podcasts or music or whatever that might be. I'll start with Ebison, and then we'll go back to Reuben.
I think the biggest thing is know the why. Know the why behind why do you want to do this? Why do you want to start a podcast? Is it because everybody else is doing it, or like why? Why do you want to take up that career? Why? Like once you have that why, nothing else can like even when somebody comes and says like, oh, why are you doing it? You have an answer because you have a perspective. So I'm a big person who like loves knowing the why behind things. So yeah, I think that's my biggest thing. Know the why behind why you're doing it, and be so confident and rooted in that why. So like do all the research you can to, if somebody else comes and asks me why am I doing this a certain way, know why you're doing it. So you're not like, oh, I don't know, I need to figure out. But so find your why, and then I think that's gonna like fuel whatever it is that God put on your heart to do. So
Yeah,
over to you, Reuben.
That's so good, bro. Yeah, I mean, it's so good, man. The why, and I guess after you figure out your why, I think it's just being bold and walking in the authority that God has given you. I'm really intentional about like the dreams that God has given us. I don't think that God gives us dreams as a coincidence. I think that there's something that God is like an act of obedience that He wants us to also like be able to follow through with when He gives us certain things, And sometimes God doesn't give us a full glimpse of it. It's just every step that you take, like it's like the next step will be shown to us, the next path will be shown to us. So once you figure out the why, is just like be bold, believe in yourself, take that risk, like whether it's a risk that you might think would fail, like who cares? At least God's there with you, like He's with you through your ups and downs and through the whole journey, the whole process, is what we all should enjoy, because there's never a moment of feeling like we ever arrived anywhere. So if you feel like I'm going to start a podcast, and going back to Ebby's why, I'm going to make a podcast because I want to be the biggest podcast on iTunes, the top charts podcast. If that's your intentionality, like you remove God from the whole journey process. Like for me, is like if I'm making music, cool. If there's 2 or 3 people who make it, good. But hey, man, I get to do this with God. I get to do this with my friends. Sometimes, like even like people discontinue friends. Like they're like, as long as my podcast or my music is the trending thing, and then you forget your friends through the process. You forget also. I would say, like, as you take those bold steps, remember that it's a journey that you take with God, and every step of the way, God will show you what to be. So, yeah.
I think that's so good with what you both of you guys share. Like, like I can't believe it's like 30 minutes in, and yeah, but I still want to say like this was an amazing session. I think we should do a part 2 sometime in the future while you guys resume your beautiful podcast. Like once the new episodes come in, we'll probably do a part 2 about it. But yeah, but thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your thoughts, knowing your why, keep putting God in the equation, and then moving forward and building the community, building a legacy, and that's amazing, and I feel like it was such, it was an eye-opening session for me too, where I could learn a lot of things from you about how you guys were inspired. And I feel like, every time I do a podcast, the first person who is being inspired is me, because I'm like getting the backstories of how all these things happen. And I feel like that's needed for people, especially like, when you do stuff, you need to be inspired. Like, you need to pour in order to get poured out. So so that when you put that in, this is what is needed. But thank you guys. It was such an amazing time to have you both on this podcast, and I really thank you for your time. I know Reuben is one of the hardest people to catch on schedule in Dallas, but still I'm glad we we got it for some time on this podcast.
Oh man, anything for you, bro. I just want to boast about Matthews, bro. He's such a good guy. such a genuine heart. Is it okay, bro? He's like, bro, no.
I'll probably cut this off, but still, you can go for it.
He's gonna. I was just
cut
gonna
it
say
off.
that he's gonna cut it out.
He's gonna cut this off. I know it. Well, if it does make it, man, he's one of the biggest collaborators of our generation, and we're thankful for you too, bro. Like, thank you for giving us this platform, especially coming from me, and Abby can feel the same way. So super proud of you, bro.
Yes.
Like, really.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you.
man.
Thank you.
Super proud of what you guys are doing too. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you guys for joining here. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening. That was Abeyson Job and Reuben Philip from Beautiful Ways. Do give their podcast a listen and make sure stay updated for their future episodes. Also order their merch. I think Reuben owes me a free t-shirt, but still,
A free t-shirt? We don't have free t-shirts. Who's giving out free t-shirts?
All right, guys. So no free t-shirts, but yeah, make sure you guys order
I'm
that
just
merch.
joking. Reuben, you do you.
No, I'm
All
kidding.
right.
I was just holding up to it. But thank you, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you guys for joining. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day off. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for our next episode.